Hey, what is up everyone? So with season 15 finally over, I think it's a good time to look at the first 15 seasons of the game and just rank them all. Now back when season 10 was close to being over, we actually did a ranking for the top 10 seasons of the game, and I purposely have not revisited that video so that I could come into this ranking with kind of a fresh mind. So if you watched that previous video and you're confused, just, opinions change over time, and this is kind of where I'm at right now. So with that said, we have 15 seasons to go. Obviously, season 16, it's too early for us to rank that one, but once we get to something like, season 20 or so, then we'll rank all 20 of them, and season 16 will be included for that. So let's start out with our worst season ever, which is season 9. Now, I feel like this probably isn't controversial. Now, there's probably people that say that certain seasons are worse because of, what they added and stuff. But really, the reason season 9 is at the bottom of my list for this video is because it didn't add anything really. The biggest thing that it added was the chest of fortune, but everything else about it was really bug fixes. It was stuff like fixing so that fog showed up again in the game and other stuff like that, or making like world events work better, and just improvements. And these were great improvements. I'm happy that they're in the game, but they were kind of features that should have been working to begin with, or kind of making things work a little bit better. I'd have to look back again, but I think the best thing that season 9 did was, I think this is the season where when you picked up something with the harpoon, it automatically placed it on the ground next to you instead of you having to grab it from the harpoon. I think that was season 9, and that was by far the best thing that was added with this season. And I'm kind of joking with that, but I'm also very serious. I think that is a great addition, and season 9 did have a handful of great additions and changes and stuff. And even the Chest of Fortune at the time was pretty fun addition to the game and reminded me of the old days with the Chest of Legends. So there is good stuff to like about season 9. We haven't really had a bad season of Sea of Thieves. We've just had some not so great ones. The last thing I'll say about season 9 is the mistake that they made with season 9 is they should have bundled in the Monkey Island content into season 9 and made season 9 basically the Monkey Island update with all those additional changes. Now, for that, they would have had to move up when they released the Monkey Island Tall Tales, because the Monkey Island Tall Tales basically came out towards like the middle of when season 10 was supposed to start, but because season 10 caused so many problems, season 9 just got extended super long to the point where we actually started getting those Monkey Island Tall Tales. If they could have changed the release schedule and made it so that the Monkey Island Tall Tales came out earlier on and they could have bundled it in with season 9, then I think it would have boosted up season 9 a good amount. Even despite me not really liking the Monkey Island Tall Tales, I think just that alone probably would have helped this season, especially in the eyes of the community. But anyways, perfectly mentioned, our next one is season 10, following up directly from season 9. Season 10 was not a great time, but unlike season 9, it actually did add some new things to the game. Those new additions weren't great in terms of adding something fun or new to do in the game, but at least it's something new. So, season 10, because of how much it was delayed, it basically took what was supposed to be the season 11 content and brought that into season 10, which is very shocking to me because if you just looked at season 10, which we're about to get into what content it was, but it was meant to be basically just guilds, which is absolutely insane to me because literally are pointless to me. I think there's good aspects of the guilds, but for the most part, they really don't matter. Basically, the idea with guilds is that it's an expansion of what we got with captaincy, and now you can basically share your ships with your friends and other players in your own guild. And these guilds would have basically their own kind of trading company. You have like a guild emissary that you could use to level up, and you have the emissary ledger. That's kind of like the main thing that you're trying to do with the guild emissary. And there's a lot of good ideas here, but it doesn't go far enough to really be that satisfying. A lot of players I don't think can really take full benefit of the guilds, and for me personally, I've seen a lot in the comments of my own videos and just kind of anecdotally people that I've seen online talking about guilds. Most people just don't have enough people that they know that also play Sea of Thieves to take advantage of a guild. So they usually end up just joining someone random online just so that they can try to get the emissary ledger rewards. They're not really taking full benefit of, the idea that you and your friends can like share ships together, and you're kind of bonded together under this one umbrella and all that kind of stuff. Those were cool ideas, but it just didn't go far enough to be beneficial, and the player base just can't really take advantage of an idea like guilds. So, from the very beginning, I think it was a flawed concept, but even with the implementation that they had, there just wasn't enough there to make the guild that special. Really, the best thing that you got from it is the ability for your friends to share ships. And I think really the only true thing that I like about the guilds is that, say, if my friend is hopping on the game, they can get on our ship without waiting for me to start the game. So that's like the biggest benefit of it. But other than that, it's just kind of superfluous. It really has no impact on your game at all. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in terms of what they added with Season 10 because I think it ties into this as well. So they also added Safer Seas during Season 10, and this was the PvE only, no one else being able to bother you playing Sea of Thieves. This was pretty controversial at the time. I've softened on Safer Seas over time because what we didn't know back then was that PlayStation was getting added, which made sense. You can kind of need a sandbox area for new players, like genuinely new players, with everyone coming in from a new platform to learn the game and have like their own safe environment to do that. But they also made it so that if you didn't have Xbox Live or PlayStation's online subscription, whatever it's called, then you could still play Sea of Thieves, but in that Safer Seas mode and just not play with other people online. And I think that's great, honestly. I think that actually validates having the mode. And it kind of leaves the door open in the future for potentially if they ever wanted to make it so that, if they wanted to take Sea of Thieves down and, they were done updating it or whatever and they were going to take the servers down, there's potential that they could make it so that you have some sort of like local version and it'd basically be like Safer Seas that you could play, and that would be kind of the direction that they go with the game. So while I was a little bit hesitant with Safer Seas when it first came out, it really felt like the developers were kind of going back on what they had always said the game was meant to be. Now, in retrospect, knowing what we know now with the PlayStation players being added in and the ability to access it without having Xbox Live or online subscriptions and that kind of stuff, I think it's actually turned out to be a little bit more favorable than it was when it first released. The reason why I wanted to skip to talk about Safer Seas first, though, is they had a huge opportunity that they completely missed. They should have made it so that if you have a guild, then you can basically have your whole guild be in Safer Seas all together at once and make it like your own private server. I know that kind of goes a little bit against what Safer Seas is. I'm talking more about like a just custom server, whereas what Safer Seas is really just basic Sea of Thieves, but without other players. Kind of different what it is, but it would have been really cool if you could invite your whole guild into a Safer Seas server, and then you can do like your own custom ship battles, or you want to have like a ship race, or you want a TDM, or whatever you wanted to do. That would have been a perfect way to make the guilds relevant and actually have gameplay functionality, get more players on board with Safer Seas being added, and not make it so controversial because, even the people that just want PvP and enjoy that aspect of the game, there's something new for them to do with Safer Seas, and it makes the season more cohesive because they actually work together. I feel like that was a missed opportunity, but I just wanted to bring that up again because I really wish there was a way to do like custom servers or something in the game. Anyways, though, the final thing that we got with Season 10, and I've talked about it in a few videos recently again, is the Skull Siren song, which when I saw the initial announcement of it and what they were doing with it, I knew immediately that was going to be a failure. And I had talked about that. A lot of people, were against me on that and said I was completely wrong. And then when it first released, everyone was talking about, oh my gosh, we're back to peak Sea of Thieves. It's amazing. The game is so back, blah, blah, blah. That lasted like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at the most. And then everyone forgot about the Skull Siren song, never touched it again. And I felt pretty justified saying that it was not going to be here for the long term. And while it's still in the game, technically, I never see anyone doing it. I actually still do it, just uncontested every time, mainly because I just am trying to get the combinations done for it, which is a huge grind, but it's actually one of the easiest grinds to do since no one is actually competing for it. So for me, it worked out, but ironically, even though Season 10 sounds like it added a lot to the game, it kind of didn't really add much at all in the long term. In terms of like impactful updates to gameplay, Saber Seas obviously is a huge impact to the game long term, but it didn't really change anything of how you play Sea of Thieves. You know, even if you get in Safer Seas, it's basically the same game that you were playing in the High Seas mode. So similar to Season 9, where these were good additions to the game, it didn't really change much of what you were actually doing while playing the game. So for that reason, it's why it's at the bottom of this list. So both of those I feel like I took a long time talking about, but I guess if you are saying something is the worst season or one of the worst seasons of the game, I feel like you have to justify it. This next one I'm not going to talk about too long because it's season 15 and I just made a whole video reviewing the whole season and why I think it was a failure. Now, the reason why season 15 is not the bottom of our list is because it did actually add a bunch of new content to do. Most of it was recycled content, but it was content to do. The Hunter's Call Emissary was great. Boar hunting was very underwhelming when I tried it out. At least it's something new, and I think it has more longevity than something like the Skull Siren Song. But otherwise, it's going to be at the bottom of my ranking for seasons. Speaking of recycled content, our next season is Season 2. So, Season 2 for a long time was one of the seasons that I didn't really like a lot at all back in the day, because that to me was one of the first examples of recycled content. Whereas now I kind of look back at it and I'm like, we had it good back then. Now it seems like everything that we get is recycled content. But with the Season 2, there was two big tentpole features, and the biggest one was the Fort of Fortune. The Fort of Fortune I've come to kind of like now because it's more of like a more difficult skeleton fort. I think it not being able to be a raid voyage helps with its longevity because it's a little bit more special. It's similar to the Fort of the Dam, where it's not something that you can do as easily all the time. But back in the day, and even still to now, I look at the Fort of Fortune and it's just basically taking multiple different pieces of content already existed in the game and mashing it together. You had the Ashen Winds that was added the year prior with the Ashen Lords and stuff, which were one of my most disliked world events as well. I never really liked the Ashen Lords. I personally, to me, just don't find it that fun to fight with them. So I never really enjoyed them, and then seeing them as part of this new Fort Fortune did not really appeal to me. And essentially, you just took the Ashen Lord from there and plopped that same world event on top of a skeleton fort. And then you just gave it some better treasure. That is really what the Fort of Fortune is. So when I saw that, Season 2 was at the bottom of my list because of that. The one thing that I like about Season 2 a little bit more than Season 15, which Season 15 arguably had more content than Season 2, is that I actually do like the trade routes that they added. So this was kind of a smaller little gameplay addition that they had with the Merchants Alliance, where you could basically get cargo and you could look at the trade routes at any of the different outposts and you could see like which outpost had a surplus of cargo and which ones were in need of certain cargo, and you could go and buy a surplus of certain items at certain places and then go try to sell them at places where they needed them, and you could try to kind of, you know, work with the market that way. I thought it was a pretty fun little cool system. I played with it for a few seasons. I actually did enjoy doing this for a while, and it was a way that I leveled up my Merchants Alliance a lot. But overall, it didn't really have that longevity that I needed to really rank it much higher than this. But I do think I enjoy that feature a little bit more than anything that we got with Season 15. With that said, though, let's move on to our next season, which is Season 11. Season 11 was difficult for me because on the surface, it's genuinely a really great season update. It doesn't really add any new gameplay features outside of, say, the raid voyages, which I wouldn't count the raid voyages as being new content, but it allows you to interact with the game in a new way, which actually does feel genuinely new. So you're able to do stuff like do an Athena's Fortune version of a sea fort, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's, basically reusing the stuff that already exists in the game, but it is, a new way to interact with this stuff, which was nice. The problem that I had with season 11 back in the day was it was following up from season 9 and season 10, which, as we've already talked about, were my worst two seasons ever. So we went through an entire year of just lackluster or boring content added to the game to have season 11 that was kind of, updating a lot of the systems that were in the game, like the voyage system and expanding the trading companies, but it wasn't adding any new gameplay activities to do. So it made it hard for me to enjoy season 11 back in the day. But all the features that we got with season 11, I think are great. I really love the raid voyages now. I think it does hurt tucking a little bit, some of the stuff they did with diving to voyages and stuff. But in terms of me playing the game, I really enjoy their raid voyage mechanic. And I love that we have expanded trading companies with distinction levels and all that stuff. So overall, season 11 was pretty good. The next season that we have is season 7, and I think that's kind of similar update to season 11, where it didn't really add anything new in terms of gameplay. The best thing that I think season 7 did was it added the sovereign tent, which made selling your treasure so much faster than it used to be, because you could just harpoon that stuff right up there and then just sell it immediately. It definitely made tucking at outposts a little bit more interesting. I think it actually, in some ways, made it easier to tuck at an outpost. Whereas in the past, if you wanted to try to tuck at an outpost and steal someone's treasure, it was actually a lot harder because they have to run the treasure from their ship to the selling point and like go back and forth, and they would spawn back in a lot quicker than say someone that just harpoons everything at the sovereign tent and then you kill them and then try to sell quickly. So interestingly enough, you think it helps you get away faster from PvP and other people attacking you. In some ways, it makes it a little bit easier for the person attacking you to steal your treasure. A little bit of a side tangent there, but it was just something I was thinking about. Overall, even though Season 7 had a lot of bugs when it first released, I love all the additions that we got with it. With the ability to actually own our ships and be able to have custom presets for cosmetics and stuff saved to the ship, as well as just all the cosmetics that were added with it, such as like the captain's chair or like the rugs or the bed and everything. The only thing that's hard for me with captaincy is as a solo player on a sloop, usually, there's not really much opportunity to show captaincy decorations across the ship. You basically have like the rug. I think you can customize one of the curtains, and you have like the bed, but there really isn't much else. The main customization that you have on the sloop is with the trinkets. The trinkets are really cool. I think they're a nice addition and a nice way to decorate your ship. But I do hope that we see in the future a little bit more expansion to captaincy. Stuff like being able to customize maybe like the ladders on the ship or customizing the map table or something like that. Those things I think would be nice. I think there's still room to grow with captaincy. Moving on though, we have Season 8. Season 8 is a really great update that wasn't for me. And what I mean by that is, I think genuinely on the surface, there's no denying that season 8 was a really amazing season. So when I put it kind of like in the middle of this list, I'm not trying to say like that it's average, but for me personally, the impact of season 8 has not been felt. And when I'm thinking about these rankings, I'm kind of thinking of not only how did I feel back then when it first released and what did it add, but what has the impact of those additions been for the long term of the game. With Season 8, the main thing that I added was the two new factions, the Guardians of Fortune and the Servant of Flame, and it brought in the Hourglass mode where you could have the PvP fighting and all that stuff. The PvP Hourglass mode could have been really great, but it has several glaring flaws, which I've talked about multiple times. The biggest one to me being that it needs a time limit, and you can have battles that either last like 5 minutes, or you can have battles that last like 3 hours with the other person just running in a circle away from you so that they can try to get you to quit the game and they can get an easy win. It has a lot of flaws that they've never even attempted to really correct, and for me, it's just something that I never touch. I don't enjoy it, and I think actually the worst part about Season 8 is that they locked some really cool stuff like the Reaper's Lair, the Skeleton Curse, or the Ghost Curse to only being able to access them from this hourglass mode. There's no other alternative path to be able to access these things in the game. Maybe that would change in the future, but for right now, the impact of Season 8, I can on the surface say that it's a genuinely great update for the people that it's designed for. For me, I'm not someone that like that. I prefer, sneaking up on, like, tucking on ships, or, PvP where you're fighting for, like, a treasure item or something like that, or just something similar to what we had with Arena. I think Arena was great. But one on one, mostly ship combat, in a area that is pretty big and doesn't have a time limit is just not enjoyable to me. But sticking with PvP stuff, I guess, our next season is season 13. So season 13 is where we start getting into the seasons I actually am more fond of. Whereas I think season 8 and the previous ones that we talked about before, I look back at those and I see pretty big flaws or things that I just didn't like about them. Whereas season 13 onward, while they may have their problems, I think all of these seasons were pretty good seasons on their own. Season 13, the reason why it's kind of towards the middle of this list is mostly because I think the Burning Blade hasn't really had a lasting impact. It's similar to the Skull Siren song, where it's really heavily reliant on PvP interaction, which just really hasn't cultivated around the Burning Blade. And even when I play now, I barely see the Burning Blade spawn into the game anymore, which is kind of odd. So they've really decreased that spawn rate, and I can't even remember the last time that I've seen the Burning Blade. But the main reason why I'm kind of fond of Season 13 is that it added the skeleton camps, which I think are really nice additions to the game. They're highly replayable, they're genuinely new content with the constellation puzzles and all that stuff. And once you know how the constellation puzzle works, you can basically kind of do them really quick. And while you don't necessarily want things that are super easy to do, I do like content that's added to the game that is like a predictable amount of time that's not going to take a ton of time for me to do. That's why I really enjoy stuff like the sea forts and things like that, which we'll definitely talk about later in this video. But anyways, while Season 13 is a pretty mixed update for me, I think it's heavily carried by the addition of the skeleton camps, which is something that I still do often and I enjoy. Next up, we have Season 3 of the game. Season 3 was really hard for me to place. On the one hand, it added probably some of the best content that we've ever had in the game, with the 5 Pirates of the Caribbean Tall Tales. On the other hand, it really kind of felt like a content drought after that, because they released all the Tall Tales all at once at the beginning of the season, and then in the main adventure mode, there wasn't really much new to do. We had some new enemies that were popping up in the game, but there wasn't really anything outside of that to like do with those new enemies. It wasn't until future seasons after that that we got like new things with those new enemies added. So, season 3, I think this is probably the best spot to put it in, because the Tall Tales are generally some of the best content that we have in the game. But on the other hand, the main core part of Sea of Thieves, while adding some new enemies, with those enemies spawning way too frequently back then, it's another one that's kind of a mixed bag for me. Moving on from that though, let's talk about Season 5 of the game. Season 5 is probably the first update that I would consider a sandbox season. Season 5 is something that we would see happen multiple times in even just in this video, but there it was basically an update that was a bunch of smaller features focused on enriching the sandbox of the game. So it wasn't like a big temple feature, it wasn't new tall tales, it wasn't a new world event or anything like that. It was stuff like fireworks, being able to bury treasure, or the storage crate mechanic where you basically could pick up a storage crate, go up to a barrel, and basically be able to pull in all the different resources and add it to it. These were all really great. I think the fireworks were kind of just a little bit of a gimmick, but I'm happy with them being in the game. I think the flares are pretty cool, to be honest, and I use them on occasion. But stuff like the bearing mechanic, you can really get strategic with that when you're tucking and stuff, and you need to take the treasure and put it somewhere. You can lay traps if you put like a keg in it and you bury that, or you leave it partially buried so it's harder for them to see. There's a lot of ways you can use the bearing mechanic to really enrich the game, and that's not even talking about like being able to put your maps on the quest board and that kind of stuff. which is a pretty cool feature. And even that storage crate mechanic that I mentioned, that's a huge mechanic on par with what I talked about earlier with, say, like the harpoon change that they did. Those are things that you don't really think about anymore, but were really game changers when they were added. In terms of the quote unquote sandbox updates, Season 5, I think, while being the first, was also probably the best one that we ever got. Because I think all the features that they added were genuinely great and actually did feel impactful. And the fact that Season 5 was sandwiched in between multiple big content update seasons, I think really helped it not feel similar to stuff like Season 11, where we felt like we were in a content slash activity drought, where there wasn't really anything new for us to do. We had tons of new stuff from the previous seasons and then the seasons after Season 5 to enjoy. So taking a little bit of time to kind of enrich the sandbox made sense at that time, which is why I think Season 5 worked so well. Moving on though, we have one that's kind of close to my heart, but I feel like was not as well received by the rest of the Sea of Thieves community, and that's Season 14. Season 14 was the update that was designed for me. Whereas, say, Season 8 was designed for the really heavy PvP, kind of hardcore players that, are just want to go straight in the battle. Season 14 was designed for a player like myself that enjoys tucking, being sneaky, even kind of being a little bit goofy sometimes. This was the update that I was really excited about, especially when we saw it in the preview event and all the things teased for it. And it has some really great mechanics that were added with it. Stuff like disguises, I think, are a huge thing. Crouching mechanic, I don't know I've really utilized it to its fullest yet, but I think it does work out pretty well. I actually do really like the hanging on the side of the ship mechanic. I didn't think that was going to be that effective. I thought that was kind of a little bit of a gimmicky thing, but I actually have used it many times. I've boarded a ship, and then like right after I got on the ship, someone starts boarding, and I kind of panic, and then I'm like, oh, let me crouch and then go and get on the wall and like hang from the wall, and then I'll wait to get into a better tucking spot. And I've used that on many occasions. I haven't gotten caught, so it actually works out pretty well. And even stuff that they added later on with the seasons, such as like with the blowpipe or the grapple gun, those two additions I think also were really great. I think the blowpipe has a lot of potential in the future if they add new dart types to it. There was stuff that they talked about like having a dart where when you shoot it, it would make like noises depending on what you hit it with. So like you could shoot a dart at the anchor and then it would make it sound like the anchor is going down, or maybe you could shoot it at the cannon and it would make like a cannon shooting sound. And I wish that they included that still with what they released because I was really excited for that. I think it could have been really fun for situations where you can make someone think that their anchor was going down or whatever the case may be. But in terms of the blow darts we did get, stuff like the mimic dart is pretty cool. I just think that that could be expanded on in the future. But overall, I really enjoyed season 14. I think the disguises are probably the best thing that was added with this, but really all the new additions are stuff that I really like. With that said, though, something that I found while making this ranking is that what appeals to me more is new activities to do rather than having new features in the game. Season 14 was a lot of new features, but nothing new to do. And while I don't think that's as much of a problem with Season 14, other updates that are similar to that, I think that is more of a problem. This next season that we're talking about is Season 1, and the reason why it's up at the top of this list is it has one of my favorite voyages in the game with the Lost Shipment voyages. I'll admit though, I don't really do them too often, but I think this is genuinely one of the best voyages they have in the game. It has a pretty, decent story lore to it in terms of, the shipment being lost and you're kind of following the trail of it. It is a good length. It doesn't take forever to do. I feel like some of the voyages in the game just are such a drag to complete because they just take so long, especially like some of the older Athena's Fortune voyages or like the Legend of the Veil, stuff like that. They just take way too long to do. And often those voyages don't really have enough of a reward to make spending all that time worth it. And also, the gameplay for a lot of those other voyages isn't usually that appealing to me. The Lost Shipment voyages, on the other hand, don't have any of those problems for me. It's a good length. I enjoy the core gameplay of doing the voyage. It's highly replayable, and it gives you a lot of value when you do it. You basically can unlock this huge vault of treasure that's Merchant Alliance related. I think it's really great. I really enjoy doing them. Once that came out, I was doing a ton of them, and that was the only way that I was progressing my Merchants Alliance. That was really the main thing with season one. There wasn't really much else going on with season one in terms of like new content being added. And I'm not really talking about events for these seasons. I've talked about events in the past ranking for seasons. This one, there's just been so many events, and then you get kind of messy with all the adventures and stuff that I just felt like it's better to look at stuff that's currently still available in the game from these seasons and kind of like the legacy of these seasons. So, season one and season two had pretty good events, but I'm not really factoring that in for this ranking. Moving on, though, at our third spot, we have season 12. This one made it pretty high in the list, mainly because I just think it's similar to season 5, where it had lots of smaller additions kind of meant to expand the sandbox of the game, but they were all really great additions. My favorite of which being the throwing knives that we got. The throwing knives are a thing that I use all the time. I think they're really satisfying to use and really satisfying when you throw them and you land the hit and everything. Other stuff that we got is the double barrel pistol. I think that is an okay weapon. I don't really use it too often, but I've been trying to use it a little bit more recently. I really enjoy the new bone collar as well as scatter shot. I think both of those are really nice additions and kind of brings it back to one of my favorite updates we've ever gotten in the game with the Heart of Fire. Kind of reminds me of that kind of update where we got some similar additions with the chain shot and the blunder bomb. So that was really great. We got the zip lines, which I think the zip lines are a little bit overrated. They don't really do that much for me, but in terms of adding them, I think it's fine. I think it would have made more sense to add them back in season 9 with the release of the Monkey Island Tall Tales, but regardless, you know, they're just kind of whatever. And the harpoon tightrope walking, I think that's also really cool. We also had the wind collar, which I didn't mention yet, mainly because I just honestly forget about it all the time. I've only seen it and used it a handful of times. They made it so that the spawn rate was pretty low back in the day, and then they increased it later on, but by that point, I stopped kind of looking for it or caring about it. So, it's fine. The wind color, I think, is a fun little, gimmicky type of item in the game, but not something where I've really used it for anything substantial. But overall, I think it's just a solid season update. The only thing that really holds it back is that there wasn't anything new in terms of gameplay to do, which season 12 was kind of having that problem basically because it had just followed up from season 11, season 10, and season 9, which all didn't have anything new really to do that was that interesting. Really, the only thing new we had from that period of time was the Skull Siren song, which we've already talked about why people stopped using that, and the Monkey Island Tall Tales, which Tall Tales are good additions to the game, but they don't really impact the main adventure mode. You kind of do them once or maybe once or twice, and then you kind of forget about them. So that's why, I think season 12 had a little bit of problem back then. But looking back on it now, I think its legacy and everything that it added was a really great package. Moving on, these final two were really hard for me to place. I feel like they could be pretty interchangeable, but for right now, at our second spot, I'm going with season 6. Season 6 is a really great season, and what I would really like to see for seasons in the future. I think it's a great model of separating the content out, but having both of those pieces of content being very substantial and being very engaging. First, we had the sea forts that were added, which I absolutely love the sea forts. This is the thing that I probably do the most in Sea of Thieves outside of tucking and PvP. It's by far one of my favorite additions in the game. I didn't put it at the top of this list because I think our number one spot is just a little bit better as a season, but I really love the Sea Forts, and then we got the Legend of the Veil Voyage from that season. I mentioned earlier, I don't really do the Legend of the Veil that often, but I will say it's definitely the best Pirate Legend Voyage that we have. And the thing that I like about it is that it has replayable aspects to it, but it also brings in some tall tale aspects to it. So it kind of gives that little bit more of a story cinematic feel to it. and I hope that we get more voyages similar to The Legend of the Veil in the future. One thing that does kind of hurt Season 6, in my opinion, which you can choose whether or not you want to use it against Season 6 or not, but Season 6 coincides with the death of the arena. When Season 6 released, they removed the arena, so it's kind of intrinsically linked together, which I didn't really factor that in for this, but you could say that Season 6 loses a few points because of it killing off the arena. So let me know in the comments below if you factor that in for your own personal ranking. For me, I'm not going to hold it against it because I just don't think it's fair to do that, but to each his own. For our number one spot, and if you've been keeping track at home, you already know what this is going to be. It is Season 4. Season 4, I don't think is a lot of people's favorite season, but for me, I think it actually is one of our most impressive seasons that we've ever gotten for Sea of Thieves. If you think about it, Season 4, with the release of the Sunken Kingdom, is a whole new region. It's on par with something like the Devil's Roar, but actually giving more engaging content with that. The Devil's Roar obviously is pretty cool with all the volcanoes and stuff and it being a whole new region, but it's kind of doing the same thing that you were doing in the main Sea of These regions. Whereas with Season 4, you basically had the Sunken Kingdom underneath the water, and you had two types of things that you could do. You could either do the Siren Shrines, or you could do the Siren Treasuries. And this was great. The Siren Treasuries are highly replayable, and they're similar to how I like the Sea Forts. The Sea Forts I like a little bit better because you're not as vulnerable to other ships and stuff, and I just kind of like the gameplay of that a little bit more. But the Siren Treasuries are really fun to do. You get to fight a variety of different enemies with ocean crawlers or the skeletons and all that stuff all down there. You have a decent amount of treasure that you can get from it. It's a good showcase of using the trident down there. And overall, I think it's just a really good replayable thing. The other side of Season 4 is you get the Siren Shrines. And the Siren Shrines are kind of more akin, in my mind, to like the Tall Tales, where there are these really nice environments that you get to walk through and stuff, and you complete puzzles, and you can get a little bit of treasure from it, but a lot of it just comes down to kind of exploring and kind of just solving puzzles and that kind of stuff. And there are some Siren Shrines that I didn't really care for, but there are other ones that I absolutely love, and I think are some of the best environmental work that they've done in the game. Overall, I think if you look at the Sunken Kingdom, both of these things all added together for Season 4, it's a pretty impressive season, especially compared to all the other seasons that we've gotten. I think if you look at something like Season 15, which we just got, in comparison to Season 4, it is so vastly different in terms of how amazing and how new all the content was with Season 4 and all the work that went into that, as opposed to Season 15, which felt just very recycled and same as what we've already had. But that was definitely a lot. I don't even know how long this video is now. This video definitely went on a lot longer than I was expecting it to go, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, it would be great if you like and subscribed. And also, let me know in the comments below, what is your personal ranking, or just let me know what is your favorite season of Sea of Thieves. But that's all I got for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to check out some of these other videos that are similar to this one. But that's all I got for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye y'all.